Hello. Hey, Pratik. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Again, let's do another sound check, please. Can you hear me? I should be audible. Okay, great. Thanks for confirming, Pratik. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? So again, we might have a little bit of an issue with my laptop not charging when Lightroom is active. So who knows? I tried to run this on my desktop, but it's becoming a bit of a problem. Uh, the setup is a little more complicated because of the audio. So for now, I'm just going to keep it on the laptop and hope for the best. Okay, so let's get to questions. Is there a known problem to import images from iPhone to Lightroom? For some reason, I'm not able to see that folder in Lightroom. Um, so Prashant, so that's a combination of using Lightroom. Okay, let me think of the right way to answer that question. So when you use Lightroom on your phone, then you're actually using Lightroom CC, right? So when you use Lightroom CC, those photos are getting uploaded to the cloud. And sorry, let me just minimize that. So those photos are getting uploaded to the cloud under Lightroom CC. Now, Lightroom Classic can sync those files to itself, to the main catalog, but can only sync those files to one catalog. So if you're using multiple catalogs, that's what might be creating the issue. Right? So you might have one catalog which is being synced to Lightroom CC and one which is not. So that's one potential reason for the problem. Now, I can't even demonstrate this to you right now because my primary catalog is currently being synced and is sitting on my desktop machine. So the catalog I'm using now is not really being synced to Lightroom CC, so I can't even show you the syncing process. I can show you Lightroom CC though, if that will help. But I'll do that later and I'll show you the syncing process with Lightroom CC. Hey Ashwin, it's question time. Hey Vikas. So any more questions, guys? Let me just connect my whiteboard. Let's see if the whiteboard is visible. Yeah. Okay. Just to add on to that, so you have Lightroom Classic and Lightroom CC. Lightroom CC and Lightroom CC will only sync to the primary catalog. And let me just erase that. Make it bigger. So you have to pick this catalog, right? So this is your primary catalog, and Lightroom CC will only sync to one catalog. This is a significant limitation of Lightroom CC. Lightroom CC can only write to one catalog, and you have to decide what that catalog is right in the beginning. Lightroom Classic, however, can write to as many catalogs as you want. So that's a big advantage of Lightroom CC, of Lightroom Classic. So Lilesh asks, can catalog files be exchanged between photographers? So yeah, Lilesh, the catalog file is completely portable, right? So so this is the catalog file, right? The LRCat file. So let's say you're multiple photographers working, P1, P2, and we do this a lot. We do this a lot at work. So I might start the edit for some photos, and there's some other photos which I want someone on my team to take care of because maybe they shot them or it's just a simpler edit. So what I'll do is, let's say this is the primary catalog. I'll do some of the edits, right? So this is the LR cat file. Once I'm done, I will pass it along to the other person. They'll finish the edits, and then they can just give the catalog back to me. The only requirement is that they have access to the raw files or have access to the smart previews. So you need both those things. If you generate the smart previews, then you don't need to give the other person the raw files. Then you just give them the LR file plus smart preview. Right? If you give someone these two together, they can actually edit. So that will work. Is it recommended to have one catalog versus separate catalogs for each major shoot or sessions? So again, Vidya, no easy way to answer that. It's a personal preference thing based on performance. Um, so see, how it works is the laptop that I'm speaking to you on right now, the laptop I'm using right now for editing, this is what comes with me on shoots. Now this laptop does not have my primary catalogs, right? It doesn't have those catalog files. So I have to make a new catalog for whenever I'm on a shoot, right? And when I come back, I merge those catalogs. So I normally have just a single catalog when I'm on a shoot, per shoot, and then I merge all those when I get back home, right? Now, if you're asking that question from the point of view of whether you want separate catalog files just for performance, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make any difference. It feels pretty much the same to me. It feels as slow or as fast as a single as a small catalog or separate catalogs. Ashwin says that if I delete the preview files, then previews are generated on demand when you work on an image. That's correct, and I'll demonstrate it in a second. So I'll delete the preview file, and then you will see it get regenerated. Vinayak asks, any basic configuration requirements to install and run Lightroom without issue? Okay, so that's a good one. Okay, so let me just get to that. Okay, so Lightroom hardware recommendations. Now here's the good news and the bad news. So Lightroom is going to run pretty badly no matter what you have, right? It doesn't matter what kind of system you have. Lightroom is not a smooth and seamless experience so far. It's getting better every single time, but there are always some certain irritating things about Lightroom. But as a as a minimum thing, I would tell you that if you want a machine that can run Lightroom properly, so one important thing is Lightroom doesn't really care about multi-threadedness of the application, right? So a lot of cores don't really help. I have a 16 core 32 thread machine as my primary desktop. It doesn't make any difference. I can see that Lightroom is only really using one core. So most important things are RAM and lots of it. So I recommend 16 GB minimum, and especially if you're doing landscape work and you're shooting a lot of panoramas, you will run into this limitation. So you will need RAM. The next important thing is GPU, right? So dedicated GPU is important. Of course, it'll run fine with an integrated GPU, but if you have a dedicated GPU, it does run noticeably faster, especially editing. So these two things are super important. The CPU is a little less relevant. The CPU only comes in when you export. So I put CPU performance as a third priority. But these two things are super important. Uh, the MacBook Pro I'm running right now has 16 GB of RAM and has a dedicated Radeon 560 something GPU. So it runs reasonably well. I won't say it runs great, but it runs well enough for me not to complain about it too much. All right, any other questions, guys? We have a few more minutes. Oh yeah, SSD helps as well. Sorry, I didn't mention that in that. Good point. This helps. It does definitely help. I just assumed everyone has an SSD by now, so I didn't mention it's been taken for granted. You're right. I just take it for granted that everyone has an SSD. Omkaras, is there a way to tag photos when you merge the main catalog? How will you extract a certain event at a later date? Also, in general, if you want to see a particular type of photo, say landscape across the years, how you do that. Okay, so we'll talk about that today. So what you're talking about is cataloging and tagging. Now, Lightroom has robust features built in there, including keywording and such. And the important thing is um, keywords are catalog specific, right? But when you merge catalogs, the keywords go along with everything, right? So if you keyword photos in a particular catalog and those photos are in another catalog, the keywords don't go across two catalogs. They don't sync. But when you merge two catalogs together, the keywords will float into the new catalog, into the merged catalog, if that makes sense. So I'll show you how that works. It makes a lot of sense once you actually see it working, right? So once you see it in action, it'll totally make sense. Okay. So let me. Does anyone have any other questions? I'll show you a few things in Lightroom now, if that is okay with everyone. Again, guys, fair warning that my laptop is rapidly discharging when I'm streaming and using Lightroom. So I might lose power. So if I do lose power, I will restart the setup and we'll start another stream. Hey Monali, thank you. Appreciate it. Aniket says, is lens correction profile work only on raw file? Yes, lens correction profiles generally only work on a raw file, simply because in the JPEG files, the lens correction is already added on top of it. So uh, I think you can still do it on a JPEG file, but it'll be most effective on a raw file. Shobhan says, rendering presets, will you cover them during the editing session? Yep, I'll show you how to make presets. But I'm not going to show you sort of ready-made presets. I can show you some which I have, which I downloaded for this session. But for the most part, I will just show you. I'll show you how to make your own presets. I'll just take questions for a couple of minutes more before I move on. Any other questions, guys? Um, one second. Let me just pull my. Okay, Lilish says Lightroom seems to corrupt raw files sometimes. Have you noticed how to handle? So Lightroom doesn't really corrupt the raw file. Maybe the raw file got corrupted while you imported it or copied it. Let me give you a sense of how rare that is in general. For me, I must have close to 500,000 files that have gone through Lightroom. I mean literally 500,000 files, 500,000 files. Out of those, I think maybe only 10 of them look corrupted. Right, so there's something else in your process which is corrupting the raw files. Lightroom generally doesn't do anything to the raw. Lightroom, not generally, Lightroom does not do anything to the raw files. It's just reading the raw files and rendering them out. So if something's happening in the middle of that process, it's not likely to be Lightroom. It's likely to be something else in your process. Um, Monali says, do you cull in Lightroom? Yes, absolutely. I don't use anything else. I don't use Photo Mechanic. I just use Lightroom for everything. Uh, when I ask, how do you use a correct preset for any given photo? So I encourage you not to look at presets as a solution, right? I'd rather, so what you're doing is basically thinking, I have a photo. Which of these presets are good for this photo? That's not how I would like you to think, right? Of course, you're free to think how you like, but what I'd like you to think, I would encourage you to think in a way of, here's the photo. Uh, what in my imagination will make this photo better, right? What will make it better? What will improve the photo? So when you think of it from that point of view, when you think of the result, then you will figure out what changes you need to make to reach that result. And then the presets will be secondary. The presets are just a faster way for you to get to that result. Right? So don't think in terms of, is this preset good for this photo? Think in terms of, here's the photo, what can I do to make it better? And then what presets can I use to achieve that goal? Can I show you culling in Lightroom? Yeah, we started doing culling in Lightroom. I'm going to show you some more culling, some more stuff about culling now, in a bit, in a second. Parag, no, apparently everyone else can hear me. So how is Capture One software to process photos? I actually really like Capture One. I tried it briefly. I don't have much expertise in it. I've tried it for a couple of months, so I'm familiar with it. Some of the color editing tools are great. It has layers which Lightroom does not. But the reason why Capture One didn't really fit well into my workflow is file management stuff is just generally a little better in Lightroom. So I prefer Lightroom just for that reason. Okay. So, all right. I think that's enough time for all the questions. I'm just going to move on into Lightroom, and uh, I'm keeping a close eye on the charge on my laptop. Um, so I will, whenever it feels like it's getting discharged, I will just take time to get questions. Okay. Last few questions. Monali asked, do you think Capture One handles Sony files better than Lightroom? That's what everyone says. In general, probably yes. But practically, I don't notice too much difference. I can make them look very similar. Capture One is mostly for color grading. Nope, it's actually Aniket, Capture One is very similar to Lightroom. It's an end-to-end solution. It lets you color grade, it lets you adjust exposures, it'll let you do pretty much everything that Lightroom does. Generally, the performance of the editing tools in Capture One is better. So Ninad says, I see a drastic difference in colors when opening Lightroom and Capture One. So that's the default rendering, right? So when you open something in Lightroom and when you open something in Capture One, the way the software renders a Lightroom and presents the photo to you depends on the software. So you like the default colors of Capture One better than the default colors of Lightroom. Now that doesn't say that you can't make them very similar. You can definitely make them look very similar. There are some tools in Capture One which are not available in Lightroom and vice versa, right? So one of those tools, or actually two of those tools, are so important for me that I can't leave Lightroom, right? That's basically the panorama merge and the HDR merge. Hey, thank you. So that's my photographers at Pune t-shirt. Okay, all right. So let's get started today. Otherwise, I'll just keep answering questions. Um, All right. So let's move to Lightroom. Okay. So this is the same. Let me just pull up. Hopefully my network drive will connect. Okay. So my network drive is not connecting. We can't access any of the files which are in my network drive. So we'll just work with the files that I have right now. Right. So I have these 4 photos of my cat. I have a bunch of other photos, JPEGs and RAWs. So what I'm going to do is, if you remember from last time, this is the Lightroom interface, right? This whole thing is a Lightroom interface. And in the Lightroom interface, you have here in the library module. So in the library module, you can see an overview of all your files. You can see all the photographs here that the catalog knows about. So by that, I mean this Lightroom catalog, LRC82. Just make that a little easier to see. So this catalog, Lightroom catalog 2, knows about 1868 files, right? And all those 1868 files are here. They're visible here, right? So these are all the files that you can see. Uh, right now, my network drive is disconnected. You can see that by this. So whenever you see a drive in the folder section and if it has a green marker next to it, that means that drive is currently online and accessible. You can see that this drive is online accessible. My photography drive is not. So that's my network drive. That one is not accessible. Right? So uh, first of all, let's look at organizing the photos that we have. Okay. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you for letting me know the screen's not visible. Sorry, guys. I am getting a little mixed up with everything happening at the same time. So the screen should be visible to you guys now. So let's start again. Thanks, Pratik, for letting me know. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen now. Let me just cross check. Yeah, everyone should be able to see my screen now. Okay. So now back to this again. Right back to what we're talking about. Um, you can see all the raw files up here. You can see that these are all the, we're in the folder section right now. Let me just hide the catalog section. We're in the folder section right now. In this, you can see the drives that are currently mounted on my system. So that's a macOS drive, macOS data, and the photography drive. You can see the green markers next to the macOS drive and the macOS data drive, but not next to the photography drive, right? So that's because this drive is on the network, and for some reason, with the new update of macOS Catalina, which I absolutely hate, it keeps dropping my network drive every time I restart the machine. So I have to reboot the machine to get access to the network drive. Okay. So now when I select the macOS drive and the raw files, so these are a sample of all the raw files that I wanted to show you guys. So these are all raw files available to you. Okay. Uh, but the right way to make collections, I'll show you different ways of making organizing files in Lightroom. So the better way to organize stuff is to not move stuff around in folders. It's actually to make collections, which are basically virtual folders. They're folders which they're an organizational tool which only exists inside a Lightroom catalog, right? They're catalog specific. So these collections that you see, this collection set, USA Travel, New York City, New York Streets, this is only accessible inside of this catalog, Lightroom Catalog 2. If I open another catalog, you will not be able to see them, right? And excuse my paranoia about constantly checking the battery. The laptop is just not charging. Uh, okay, so now let's look at one of these collections. These collections are the same ones which I made last time, right? I made a collection called New York Streets. These are all street photos which I shot in New York during my very brief trip there. And they're showing up as not visible because these are probably in my network drive. So let's not look at those. Let's look at these. So I'm just going to create. So let me make another collection called a test collection. So you see how that's created. So I can just press a plus next to collection section and say test. Right. So now you can see the test collection here. Right? This little thing called test. So I'm just going to select all from the raw file folder, and I'm going to drag them into the test collection. Okay, so now in my test collection, I have 17 files. Okay, so now notice one thing. If I hit the delete key now, I'm just pressing the delete key, that photo got removed from the collection. Right? The photo did not get deleted, it just got removed from the collection. So if I hit Command Z or Control Z on Windows, the photo will come back. Now just notice one thing. I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm in the folder, not in the collection. Please see the difference. I'm in the folder section, not in the collection section. Now if I delete on the same thing, it'll throw up this warning, right? It says delete selected master photo from disk or just remove it from Lightroom. So this is important. You can do you can do three things here. You can delete from disk, which means that the photo itself will be removed from your disk as well as removed from the catalog. You can cancel, of course, not to do anything, or you can just say remove. If you hit remove, the photo gets removed from the catalog but remains on your drive, right? So let's just hit remove. So now that photo is gone again. It's removed from the catalog but not from the drive. I can just hit Command Z and it'll come back. But if I delete the photo, let me just delete the photo. Right? They're all similar photos, so I can delete the photo. Yeah, I can just delete this. So now I've deleted this from disk. Now I can't hit Command Z. I'm pressing Command Z, but the photo will not come back. Right? So you have to be very careful about deleting photos from Lightroom, and Lightroom will warn you every single time. Right? Delete from disk. Now you can only delete the photos from your disk when you're in the folder section, right? You can't delete photos from your disk when you're in the collection section, which makes sense because collections are virtual folders, right? So you're not actually talking about real files, you're talking about virtual copies of those files. Virtual copies is a different term, I'll get to that, but you kind of understand what I mean, right? So let's go back to the test collection. All right, I always work in collections, and the primary reason is I don't want to make a silly mistake like deleting a photo accidentally, which could happen. I could just accidentally delete a photo. To avoid that happening, I move things into collections first. And recently, Lightroom has come up with lots of really cool tools to make it easy for you to make collections. So, for example, let's go to the exports folder, right? These are all the exports. Now, let's say I wanted to very quickly make a collection out of these. I would normally what I'd have to do is go to collections, press click, make a collection called something, and then drag and drop. But now Lightroom's made it really easy. You can right click on it, you can create a collection called exports in one click, and you can rename it also. So I'll just say test export, hit enter, and you'll see very quickly a new collection got made right here. Right? So this is a very fast way of making collections. The other way of making collections, the other type of collections, and you remember from last time we had collection sets, which are folders of collections. We had collections themselves. And then there's another category of collections called smart collections. Right? Smart collections. Now, what is smart collections? All of you guys who've used iTunes, Spotify, you can make a playlist which matches certain criteria, right? So you could make a playlist saying play all my favorite songs that I haven't listened to in the last 1 month, right? So it's totally possible to do that in Spotify or Apple Music. So smart collections are similar. Smart collections make a collection a dynamic collection which matches certain criteria that you select. So let's say I want to make a collection which says 3 stars and higher, right? So then the rating of the photo is greater than or equal to 3 stars. And if I create that collection, smart collection, it creates a 3 star and higher smart collection. Just check my battery. Oh, this is discharging. Okay. So does that make sense so far? Now watch this. Right now it says 0, but I'm just going to go to my test collection and I'm going to give this photo 5 stars and I'm going to give this photo 3 stars. Now you can see in this collection we have smart collection, 3 stars and higher. These two photos will automatically come into that collection. So it's a great way to have. So how I use this is I use this to create my portfolio really quickly. So I only use 5 stars for portfolio worthy images, which I know will be great for my portfolio. So I use lower star ratings for anything else. So if I want to quickly generate a portfolio, I just say, hey, all my 5 star photos, go. And that's it. That's my portfolio done. Right? So that's a really easy way of doing it. You can match and mix and match some really wild criteria if you want to. You could have all photos shot, for example, with a Z7, which are 5 stars. You can have all photos shot with a Z7 with a 50 lens above ISO 100, which are 5 stars. So you can mix and match very, very, very complicated criteria. Okay, so that's basically an idea of collections. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and answer any questions that you might have about collections because they're an extremely useful tool. Okay, so I'm just going to drop out of this, come back here, skip this time. And the reason I'm shutting down Lightroom is because it's extremely hungry. So I'm hoping that it will let my laptop charge while I answer questions. Okay, guys. So any questions about collections? We'll take 5 minutes to answer questions about collections. So just give me 1 second, making sure yeah, okay. All right. So if a photo is removed from the folder, does it get removed from the collection that holds it? Hold on, my video is gone for some reason. Let me just replace that with my face. Okay, so you can still see me. Okay. All right. So Abhijit asked, if a photo is removed from a folder, does it get removed from a collection that holds it? Yes, it does. Right. So it gets removed because when you're removing a photo from a folder, right, you're doing either two things. You're removing any reference Lightroom has to that photo, right? So um, let's say there's a photo in a folder, right? And then you tell Lightroom, I don't want this photo anymore. So that means Lightroom has no idea that photo exists anymore, right? So let's say there's a photo of my cat, and I don't like that particular photo. I remove it from the folder, not from the collection. So as soon as I remove it, all reference to it will be gone from everywhere underneath because that photo doesn't exist anymore in the catalog, right? So that's a good question. That's a really good question. Okay, any other questions, guys, about collections before we move on to keywording and then we'll move on to culling, right? Any other collection questions? So the collections, smart collections, and collection sets. Should we make a practice to go into the folder and delete the unwanted photos from the folder? No. So here's the deal, right? So nothing should be deleted until you finish your culling process, and even then, I would be very hesitant to delete stuff. Right? Just because I'm not perfect, I might make mistakes. So deletion is the last thing that you should do. Right? It's the last step of the process, and it's way at the end. I only start deleting stuff after client deliveries have been complete and after a month after client deliveries have been complete. Right? And the reasons for that are obvious. If you want to know, I can talk about it, but it should be pretty obvious why I do it that way. Do changes made in individual files get saved in those files or in Lightroom only? So Leonard, very good question. So any changes which you make in Lightroom only happen to the catalog. They don't happen to individual files. No file, not even the smallest, not even the one bit of data uh, in a file is altered by Lightroom. That's why it's non-destructive. That's the beauty of Lightroom. Lightroom does not change any data. Do smart collections work with photos marked as flagged, colored? Yes, it works with anything. I can make a smart collection with photos which are flagged and 5 stars and colored red if I want to. Anything. It all works. Okay, I'll take another minute for questions. Anything else, guys? Any other questions about collections before we move on? Now we'll talk about keywording. Smart collection, current smart collections can distinguish in any criteria. Okay, so I'll show you some criteria. Just give me 1 second. I'll just start up Lightroom. Uh, Parag, we have not discussed quick collections. I don't use quick collections at all, but I can show you. I just don't use it. I don't find it particularly useful. Okay, so let me just make sure that you can see my face now. Yep. Okay. Now let me just show you Lightroom. Someone asked about what criteria can you use for smart collection. So I'm just going to show you the criteria. Right. I only use this as an example, but if I do this, just look at all the options available, right? Uh, for example, I can do a smart collection of only photos which are in the collection test, which are 5 stars. Oh, okay. Let me do something even better than that. In the camera in test, which has a color rating. Let me just figure out camera info, metadata. Um, you can even do such things like does it have adjustments, does it have edits, what develop preset was used, which has a color of red and is 3 stars and greater. Okay, so let's create that collection. Right now it has zero. Let me just bring it out of this collection, sir. Right now it has nothing in it, right? Because nothing matches those criteria. Now, what are those criteria? Something in the collection test, which is 5 star or greater, which has a color label of red. So let me just give it a color label of red. Now suddenly you will see that this one has showed up, right? So that kind of answers your question, right? There are a number of criteria you can use for this. Any number of criteria that you can use for this, and you can use some really nifty ones too. So I use smart collections in my primary catalog to separate out my cameras, right? So I can very quickly in one shot get all my different cameras. In each of them will have their own collection, right? So it's super easy that way. All right, let's come back to the whiteboard and see if anyone else has any more questions. Please guide with keyboard shortcuts for Lightroom. Yeah, so I'm just going to put down the the most important keyboard shortcuts before we go to the next stage, right? Before we go to the next stage, I'm just going to put down the best keyboard shortcuts that I use. Okay, so most important keyboard shortcuts, right? First of all are the viewing shortcuts. Now, I only use a couple of these, so I'm only mentioning the most important ones. I'm not mentioning all of them, right? I'm just saying the most important ones which I use all the time, right? Let me put those up there. Right? The viewing shortcuts which I use most. G is for grid view. For right now, we are in the library module. Then you have L, you have E for loop view. So grid gives you that grid of all the photos. E, which is a loop view, gives you a magnified view of each photo. So these are the two most important viewing shortcuts. Then the next important are culling shortcuts, right? There is first one, most important, pick for pick, P for pick, U for unpick, X for reject, right? So these are the, right now we're in the library module. These are the shortcuts we're going to use. We're not going to use anything else. You can use, and of course, there are also star ratings. Star ratings are from, the keys are 1 to 5, from 1 star to 5 star, right? So that takes care of all the keyboard shortcuts that we're going to use at this point in time, right? Uh, we won't use anything else besides this. So I try to keep it super simple. I try to use a lot of keyboard shortcuts when possible, but logically speaking, I want to make it as simple as possible so I can work quickly in the tool, right? So to, let me go back to Lightroom. All right, so we're back in Lightroom again. I'm just going to check my battery. Well, it is charging a little bit every once in a while, so that's not bad, I guess. Okay, all right, so now we're back here. Now we're in that smart collection. I'm just going to ignore it. So remember, you can delete all your smart collections if you want, right? So I'm just going to select all these and I'm just going to delete these smart collections, right? So it just says delete, and now we have only one smart collection, which is without keywords. So now let's look at our test export. Okay, so this is a collection that I created for the class. There's some random photos in here. Or actually, let's look at this one because this has raw files in it. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to just experiment with the keyboard shortcuts, right, that we have. So E is the loop view. I just press the E key. So that gives you the magnified view. And here you can zoom in and see details in the photo, right? You press Z to zoom in and zoom out. I do this very rarely, so I didn't put that in there. I can put it on the keyboard shortcut thing. I'll just put it in the list. Okay. When you hit zoom, you will zoom into 1 is to 1. It says that here, 1 is to 1, which is 1 pixel of the photo is equivalent to 1 pixel on the screen. So that's really important to understand what 1 is to 1 means, 1 is to 1 zoom. Okay, so now that's E for loop view, which is the magnified view. Then you have G for grid view. This is the grid view, right? So if you mouse over each one of these, it'll actually give you, it should give you the keyboard shortcut. For some reason, it should give it to you. There you go. So it says G for grid view, right? Just manage the brightness. So these are two keys we're using, E and G, to go from loop view to grid view. Okay. Now the next keys which I talked about were the culling keys, right? So we basically have pick, flag for pick, remove flag, and reject. And if you remember the discussion last time, we only talked about using the P key or the U key. We didn't talk about using anything else. And if you notice on the keyboard, they're right next to each other. So when I start culling, so I'm going to show you a very basic way of culling. I'm not going to show you the hardcore way of culling. It requires a lot of dependencies which we can't discuss now. So there's an advanced workshop which I take on Lightroom in which goes into culling in depth. We talk hours and hours only about culling. Right? So we don't really have time to do that, but I'll show you a very quick and easy way of culling, right? So let's say you have these 16 files and you want to figure out what the best files are. So basically what you do is just hide all the panels on the side. You can figure that out yourself. There are these little arrows that you can use to hide the panels. Now you start looking at the photos. I'm in E. The way I'm showing you right now, works very well if you have a small number of files. It's very time consuming if you have a large number of files. But one thing I want to emphasize, a lot of people say that the performance of Lightroom is pretty bad. So that's why they use things like photo mechanic. So I wanted to see this. I'm just scrolling through all my 16 photos, right? That's it. You can see how fast I'm scrolling through them. I'm going through 16 photos extremely rapidly, and I can show that for 60 photos as well. Right? Just watch this. Right? So that's 60 photos I'm getting through very, 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 very quickly. Right? So there's no real performance penalty for using the grid view or using the library module. It's actually really fast in the library module, uh, with a few tweaks which I'll tell you about later. So now I'm in this module. So let's start culling. Okay, so I started this photo. Is this a good photo? Yes. Press pick. Now please ignore the fact whether the photo is good or bad. I'm Most of these photos are rejects for me. Actually, all this entire folder is a reject for me, but I'm just keeping it here so for the sake of demonstration. Right, go next. Yeah, this is great. I really like this one. I like this one. This is blank, so I don't know why it's even in there, so I ignore it. So this is a part of an HDR that I shot, right? And the last photo is not required in the HDR sequence. But I like the sequence of HDR. So I'm going to go into the grid view and here, watch what I'm going to do now, right? These 5 photos, starting from this one, actually this is a 6-shot HDR that I did. So I'm selecting them. Actually, the last one is the final HDR. So these 5 photos, I'm going to right click on them, right? And I'm going to create a stack, group into stack. So what that does, it combines those 5 photos into one logical grouping called a stack. And I can press P on the stack and it will select everything on the stack. I do this for HDRs all the time, right? So this is a standard thing I use for HDRs, this policy. This one is the actual rendered HDR, so I'm going to flag that as pick. This is interesting, right? So I don't know which one I like better. Now, realistically, the reason I shot it like this is because I knew I was going to make a panorama out of it, but I'm just pretending that. So this one is perspective corrected, so I'll pick that one. Okay, so that's how you do it. Notice at no point in time did I use the X key for anything. I just picked. I just pressed the P key. Because if I actually go down through 100 shots and start pressing X for everything, it's going to be really, really time consuming and really, really bad. So I don't do that. Okay, so now I selected I picked my photos. I've culled this set. I'm just going to remove a few because there's just too many photos that I've selected. Let's remove a couple, right? So now out of these 16 photos, yeah, out of these 16 photos, some of them are culled. Now, how do I only see the photos that I selected? Couple of ways of doing this. First way is you can see this little bar on top. So you just go to, you have text, attribute, metadata, and none. So let me just show you how all that works. And remember, we're in the grid view. This will change if I go into the loop view. If I go into the loop view, that bar doesn't exist, right? So if you're missing the bar, the search bar, you go to the grid view, press G and go to the grid view. Okay, so now how can you search? You can search by text. You can see the text as any searchable field contains all, and you can search anything you want. You can search by file name. You can search by searchable EXIF. So in this, I can actually search for photos shot with a particular camera, right? So if I say 810, right, that photo was shot with a Nikon D810. So that's why it came in that search. I don't remember what the other cameras, other photos are shot with. I think it was a Fuji. I don't know if that'll work. Yeah, so that worked. If I type Fuji, it'll show me all the photos which are shot with my Fuji camera. Right, so this is searchable EXIF. You can search by file name too. You can search by anything in here, but this is a text search only. I can't search for pic. Like if I do pic, that doesn't work, right? That won't work. So you can't pick the flag photos out with this. So what happens if you want to find the flag photos? You go to attribute, right? Now I'm here. Now notice all these fun icons, this iconography on top. So if I go to flag and I click this, that shows me all the flag photos, all the ones which are selected. I can also select by red, by color label. I can also select by rating. So rating greater than or equal to 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, or 5 stars. Right? So both ways are available to you. And you can also look by kind. So you can decide it's a movie, whatever. So lots of ways of doing that. Another way you can search through photos is once you have attributes selected, you can also hit metadata. Right? When you hit metadata, now you can actually select. Let me just pull that up there. Okay. Now you can actually select by color label. You can select by flag here, right? You can also do that. So that's all my flag photos. So with this, you can do some slightly more complicated things. So photos with my Fuji X-T2, which are flagged, right? So the good photos which are shot with my Fuji X-T2, 4 photos. Fuji X-T2 shot with a 23 lens and flagged, only 3 photos, right? So you can mix and match, slice and dice however you want. So you can get pretty interesting and complicated ways of selecting files, right? And filtering down files. And if you don't want anything, just hit none, all of it disappears. Now, another way of doing this, and I don't know why there are 2 ways of doing this, but there are, is if you look at this bottom bar here, there's a little bar on the bottom, and you can do the same thing here. You can filter by, let me just brighten the screen up, I can't see anything, right? You can do flagged here. Where's the flag? Yeah, that's a flag photos. You can do star ratings, or you can just see no filters. And you can also search by all these things. Right? So many ways of doing the same thing. And there's a little thumbnail slider to make it bigger or smaller. Right? So I'm just going to take a second. This is super important. So I'm just going to take a second to answer questions about this stuff before we move on to keywording, another way of culling. Right? So we're going to do keywording next, which is another way of organizing your files. Alrighty. So let's go back there. Let me plug in my whiteboard. All right, let's pull that up. Let's pull up your questions now. Oh, darn. Facebook is gone. Give me a second. Let me just log back in. All right, cool. All right, let's take a few minutes for questions. Hello, people who just joined. Money analysis for Windows and Mac shortcut keys are the same? Yes, they're the same. These shortcut keys are the same. But things like undo and all is different, right? So because Mac has a different kind of keyboard shortcut system, right? So can you guys see my whiteboard? Yeah, you can see my whiteboard. Okay. So for example, on Windows, it's CTRL-Z is undo. In Mac, it's Command plus C is undo. Yeah, there's some minor differences in the keyboard shortcuts, but it's very easy to move back and forth between Mac and PC. I have a MacBook laptop and a Windows desktop. It doesn't bother me. I can move back and forth really easily, right? Uh, so any questions about what we covered, guys? I'll take a couple of minutes because when I first learned about this, I had like a lot of questions about how I could use this to improve my workflow. So this it's a good time to ask any questions you might have about this stuff. And remember, when we did the culling, we only used these keyboard shortcuts. We didn't use anything else, right? We only used this. Why are there two bars of flags rating color and given top and bottom of the library module? Honestly, I don't know. We'd have to talk to someone in Adobe to figure that out. My guess is that if you go to the bar on top, which is the metadata bar, there are a lot of options up there, right? So in order to not complicate it and just make it simple, that's why I think they've given them on the bottom. So Vikas asks how to correctly flag. So that's a really complicated question. There's no simple answer to that question. So the way I do it is what decides if a photo is good or bad? So think about it this way. If I had the same set of 50 photos, let's say I shot 50 photos, okay, and you were culling them and I was culling them, would we come up with the same result? Uh, Most likely not. Mostly because I am extremely severe about culling, and there are a number of philosophical reasons why I'm so particular about it, and you are not so severe. So then you would land up with far more photos than I would, right? So now the question is, how do you correctly flag, right? Flagging. Sorry. This is your experience, your taste, and your skill, right? That's why I can't answer the question in a very simplistic way, right? So it's a combination of experience, taste, and skill. What do I mean by that? I mean, by experience, I can easily tell if I can edit a particular photo or if it's too overexposed for me to edit. So if it doesn't meet that criteria, instantly gone. No need to keep it there. Second thing is my taste. Do I think this will make a good photo? Does it match my aesthetic sense? Right? Is this photo something which I can make into something beautiful? Right? So that's my taste. The next part of it is skill. Given that it matches my aesthetic taste, given that I know on a surface level that the photo can be edited, do I have the skills to make it what I want it to be made? Right? So these three things together will let me decide if something is to be flagged or not. Prashant asks how to exit from loop view. Yeah, simple. Just hit the G key to get into the grid view. Right? Just hit this key, right? And you will get out of the loop view. Because I hope that answered your question. It's not an easy answer. It's culling is the everyone thinks editing is the most important part about post production. It's not. Culling is the most important part. Culling will remove the burden of of you having to edit bad photos, right? So in management, everyone has this 80-20 rule, right? So let me give you a realistic scenario of how this works, right? You will be spending 95% of your time editing photos, right? 95% of your time is going to go in just editing. Now, when it's such a huge amount of time which is going to go in editing and altering photos, you want to make sure that that 95% of your time is actually dedicated to photos which are worthwhile, right? You have a limited amount of time, and if you have too many photos, if you're culling, if you're flagging, if this part of it is not good, if it's not stringent enough, then you'll be wasting time on photos which don't deserve your attention, right? Your attention, think about it this way, right? In a world, we know lots of people. In its society, right? We know lots of people. We don't have time to give to everyone. We have time to give to our friends and family, and most importantly, our family. So, if you said that, so there's a really good way of thinking about this, right? Has anyone seen The Incredibles, the movie The Incredibles? This is my favorite example, right? So, in The Incredibles, there's a character called Dash. Great movie. I love this movie. It's one of my favorites. Right? There's a character called Dash. He's a little kid and he can run really fast. And I use this example a lot of times. I use this in photography 101 too. So he says that he runs really fast. He has a superpower, but he runs so fast that he's beating everyone in school. His mother tells him, "You shouldn't run so fast. It makes everyone else feel bad." So then she tells him that everyone is special, right? Everyone is special. But he says, and it's the best line in the movie, if everyone is special, then no one is special, right? So if every photo gets through this filter, then none of your photos are any good, right? So you have to be very selective about this so that you give it time for editing. Uh, how do you exit view? How do you correctly flag? If I want to select 50 photos from one project, what's the fastest procedure? The fastest procedure is what I showed you. I'll show it to you a little bit. I'll show it to you again a little better right now. How could I use these techniques to improve my workflow? So I'll talk about workflow in a second. And once you understand all the pieces and how all the pieces fit together, we'll talk about workflow right in the end. When you use the pick and all the other attributes, do you use it to put it in a collection, or do you consider the pick as the end? So I make the collections first. It's always so. Here's the flow of things, right? First is folders. This is the ingest part of your workflow. Then is all organization. Then these go into collections. Then after that you flag or cull. Then these go into editing, right? So so the picking and all the other attributes, right, all are to service this goal. That's to service the editing part of it, right? Um, mhm. Because I don't know what you're asking when you say reset or flag. When do you do destructive culling? That's a really good question. By destructive culling, I think you mean delete the photos that you rejected, right? So for professional stuff, right? For professional stuff, what I do is uh, I I deliver the photos, right? The photos are delivered to the client. I wait 1 month for the client to come back to me and tell me, okay, it's all good. Mama ji doesn't need an extra photo from a wedding. Or if I do an interior project, okay, no changes, it's all good to go. I wait a month for that, right? And then if they say no changes and it's all good, then I get rid of all the ones which are not selected in the final. I get rid of all the ones which are not selected. Right, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera. So then I get rid of all the ones which are not selected. So I wait a long time. But even then, keep in mind that even though I've removed the culled ones, my backup still has the culled photos. Right, so my backup still exists. And my backup, I keep going. So I have a standard SLA with my clients of 1 year. 1 year, I'll keep all your photos, right? Uh, right now, I have more than 1 year worth of backlog of photos. Not backlog, a backup of photos. But that's a commitment I keep. When do you do this? Vinayak, so if I really like a photo but don't get this edited better with current skills, yes, definitely. So what you should do, Vinayak, is you should keep it, and I'll show you once I have my network drive online and we go into the next session, right? I'm going to show you how I manage all this, and I manage it in a fairly complicated way, but you'll get a sense of how this is managed. But you should definitely, if you like a photo, you edit it, and you don't think you're doing it as well as you can, you should definitely keep it for the future because it's a guarantee, 100% guarantee that if you keep shooting photographs and if you keep learning editing, next year you will be a lot better than this year. And then when you edit that photo again, you will get something amazing out of it. You get something much better. So because as I am looking to change the flag, I wrongly flagged this pick instead of rejected. Because so what you do in that case, right? Look at my shortcuts. So you flag the photo, you pick the photo, right? Now you don't want it to pick, just select it and hit U, and that will just remove the flag. It will unpick the flag. That's why my fingers on the keyboard, if I could show you, are always on P and U. My fingers are two fingers always sitting on the P and U key. That's it. I'm looking to change. Lilesh asks, is there a way for Lightroom to automate the culling process? So that's a very controversial thing. So right now, Lightroom cannot automate the culling process. The culling process is an intensely personal and artistic process, right? People think that selecting good photos and rejecting bad photos is not an important part of the process. It is the most important part of the process. It doesn't get more important than that. You're deciding whether photos live and die, right? You are basically culling the herd. You are deciding your favorite child, right? So, can it get more important than that? It can't, right? So, there's no, even if there was a way to automate this, I would not let Lightroom do it. I want that. I want that in my uh, in my hands all the time. So Girish says if so one can visualize a photo post editing, one can pick it and thus the skill to edit a photo has a huge importance. Yes, definitely it does. Right. And once you kind of once we embrace the idea, right? Once we embrace the idea that photography, right? One of the greatest skill in photography is pre-visualization. Right. This is one of the greatest skills you can have. Right. So pre-visualization is so important. So pre-visualization, when I walk into a scene, right, I'm not looking at what the scene looks like in real life, right? I don't particularly care what the scene looks like in real life. Every time I look at a scene, I know as soon as I hit the button, These are the things I need to do. These are the decisions I need to make so that when the photograph gets into my computer, these are the edits that I can make, and this is the final result that I will get. Now, I might make a misjudgment maybe of 10, 15, 20% of the end result. Maybe I won't get it, but I can get very close. And as you get better and better with your tools, with your editing, and as you add more and more complicated tools, your skill of pre-visualization gets better and better, right? You'll be able to understand what the end result will be much better than you do now. And then the world becomes completely different. And then you're no longer looking at the scene in front of you, you're looking at the end result of the photo, right? So once all those things sink in, right, you can start getting amazing results. So that's a really important part of this. Okay, so now I'm going to move back into Lightroom to show you keywording, another way of organizing files. And then at the end of keywording, we're going to take questions again. So keywording will only take a few minutes. We'll do questions again, and I'll show you some very basic stuff. I'll show you the power of a raw file because that's an introduction into the edit, into the develop module. So I'll show you that in a second too. Okay, so let me just show you my screen. Let me show you how terrible my battery is. Only 5%, but I think we can make it. Okay, so let's go back to my test catalog. All right, so now in general, you'll have a lot of photos, right? You'll have a lot of photos, and it's kind of difficult to keyword and all that stuff. But I'll show you some really nifty ways of doing it fast. Let me just hide all these tools. Okay, so now let's go to keywording. Let's just put our finger on this file so we have it show up here. Right, so let's go to keywording. Just ignore the quick develop thing up there for now. We'll come back to that when we talk about editing files. Now, keywords are basically metadata that you can add to a file. Now remember one more thing. Keywords are catalog specific. It's like hashtags that you use in Instagram. But remember the catalog specific, nothing gets written into the metadata of the file. You can write it to the metadata of the file. There's a way to do it, but I generally don't bother because I'm going to merge it into my catalog anyway, right? So I don't bother about it. Now, just make sure that you can see my screen. Okay, right. So now, keywording. So keywording is basically how do you give it more descriptive identifiers. So, and keywording can be done to multiple files at the same time. So for example, let's select. So I'm just watch what I'm doing. I selected the first file, number 6. I'm going to shift and click on number 12. Right, so it selected all these files. So now I'm coming back to my keyword tag, and all these photos were New York City. So I'm just going to keyword them NYC and hit enter. So now when I deselect, which is Command D or Control D on Windows, if I select the 6th photo, you will see a keyword NYC on it, right? So now that description is there of NYC. So I'm going to take all these photos, and these are my Lightroom 101 demo photos, right? So I'm going to select these photos. I'm going to give them keyword. So you notice it says NYC star. That means that some of the photos have NYC as a keyword. It's just telling you that. But all of these are Lightroom 101. So I'm just going to give them all Lightroom 101 keyword. Right? So this one is, when I click on it, you will see it. It's NYC and Lightroom, right? This one, on the other hand, when the keyword comes up, eventually if we read it, it's a little slow right now. Come on, update. It should not have NYC in here. I don't know why it has NYC in here. But I'm just going to figure that out. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to delete the keywords from all of these. I think it's because my machine is lagging. That's why this is happening. It's not updating the keywords fast enough because the battery is almost dead. Wait, there are comments coming in. Oh, shoot, it's lagging. Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's due to the low battery or not, but yeah, my machine is just basically crippled. Okay, I don't want Scotland in there. Okay, just let me try this whole thing again. Oh, sorry, I added the keyword in the wrong way. So let me just do that again. So I'm just going to select all of these things, and I'm just going to you have to type them here. You have to type the keyword here. The reason why I'm fumbling around a lot with this is that I don't really use keywords. I find them too fiddly, too complicated, and I never search by keyword anyway, so I don't bother with keywords. Okay, so now this one is Yosemite. I'm just going to add a keyword only for that one, right? So I have all these photos belong, they have keywords Lightroom, Lightroom, Lightroom. This photo is Yosemite and Lightroom. It should not have the keyword NYC, so I'm just going to delete that keyword. Oh, damn. Guys, I am plugged into power. It's just that the damn thing is not charging. The I'll explain the problem to you. Okay, I'm going to switch off Lightroom. Maybe this is overwhelming the stream. I'm going to go back to my whiteboard.